Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today our mission is to travel 4,000 years through history. We're going to be guided by a set of sources, all centered on the Hermitage Museum's massive exhibition, The Art of Portraiture, Personality, and the Era.
And we're not just looking at pretty pictures here.
No, not at all. We are really analyzing how this ancient, enduring genre acts as a true mirror of society.
That's the key takeaway right from the start. I mean, when you think about the sheer scope of time here, we're talking from ancient Egyptian funerary rites all the way to modern video art.
It's incredible.
It just proves that the portrait is, well, it's the oldest and maybe the most enigmatic genre of visual art. You find it in every single major civilization. So this deep dive isn't just about, tracing a style. It's about tracking how our very perception of what a human being is has changed.
And what makes this story so compelling, I think, is this central tension that runs through all 4 millennia of this history. It's a constant struggle in every single portrait.
It is. It's this struggle between the external social mask, the face we're supposed to present to the world, the required persona, and the inner face, which is trying to express real personality, real character.
And the exhibition traces this whole battle, from deep antiquity with the ritual mask all the way to the digital avatar we all kind of curate today.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this right at the beginning, because the source material dives straight into the mask itself. And it starts, surprisingly, not in Rome or Greece, but in Siberia.
Right. The genre's origins are, they're fundamentally rooted in funerary rites. The exhibition literally begins with archaeological material, specifically burial masks from Hermitage excavations in southern Siberia.
From the Oglachty burial mound.
That's the one. And that detail immediately grounds the entire conversation. The earliest portraits weren't for the living, they were for the afterlife, and they were strictly focused on preserving sort of a social memory or the identity of the clan.
So once we move into classical antiquity, which really laid the bedrock for all European art, the approaches start to diverge pretty significantly. The Greeks were striving for an ideal, right? What was their goal?
The Greeks prioritized the type. They weren't necessarily interested in, a wart-for-wart likeness of a specific person. They wanted the ideal representation of a role.
A role.
The philosopher, the great orator. You see it in the exhibition pieces of Demosthenes, or that charismatic Hellenistic ruler, Mithridates Eupator. It was all about capturing the perfect embodiment of a specific societal function.
Right. So if the Greeks were focused on that generalized philosophical ideal, what was the Roman response? Their needs were totally different.
The Romans were, they were much more practical. Their goals were political. They focused on a strict, almost ruthless likeness. Physical features. During the Republic, you had this intense competition among powerful groups.
So portraiture was a tool.
It was early political advertising, absolutely. It wasn't just about depicting the person in front of you. It was about the necessity of showing ancestral traits, those physiognomic features, to prove you belong to a powerful clan.
And this is where that external style just perfectly mirrors the internal chaos of a society, right at the entrance of the exhibition with the bust of Philip the Arab. Why is that piece so staggering?
That bust it's just central to understanding the chaotic era of the soldier emperors. These were rulers chosen and then discarded really quickly by the military. Philip the Arab was a commander who seized power, and the art describing him is profoundly aggressive.
How so?
The sculptors used these non-traditional artistic means for the time, very crude, thick modeling. The hair is conveyed by these rough, almost violent incisions into the stone.
You look at that piece and you just see it. Brutality, cunning, sheer physical power. How does a style like that transmit the feeling of an entire era?
Well, that's the real revelation, isn't it? The portrait isn't just a record of the emperor, it's a barometer of the age. These portraits, like Philip's, they transmit a shared emotional state. Fear, aggression, anxiety.
It's the face you had to wear to survive.
Exactly. It shows the brutal realism required to hold on to power at that time. It's a key moment where that struggle between the internal and external face just collapses. All that's left is the aggressive, anxious mask you needed for that moment.
So we have this highly individualized but politically charged realism in Rome. And for centuries after, European portraiture is basically trying to perfect that idea of individual likeness. Let's skip the Middle Ages for a moment, but before we jump to the modern revolution, how did the Renaissance and Baroque periods formalize the standard that the 19th century had to rebel against?
That's a crucial point. For hundreds of years after Rome, the key criterion of a great portrait was likeness, or podbies, as it's sometimes called.
Mm.
It was about capturing the true look of the model, but, and this is key, enriching it with psychological depth.
So not just the physical face, but the soul behind it.
Exactly. The Renaissance formalized this. You see it in the exhibition with those 4 female profile portraits from the Lombard school. They were made for private cabinets, focusing on quiet, detailed individualism.
And later on, you get works like Gotha by Stieler or Antoni Serrato by Goya.
Right. The mission was clear. A physical and psychological mirror of the subject. It was a centuries-long golden age of technical mastery, all dedicated to preserving individual identity.
But then the 19th century hits. You've got massive societal changes and, crucially for artists, the invention of photography. Why did the ability to capture a perfect physical likeness with a machine completely shatter the old criteria for portraiture?
Photography freed the artist. It's that simple. Once a machine could capture perfect podbies instantly, cheaply, painting no longer had to serve as just a record.
And that revolutionary change, driven by artists like Cézanne and Van Gogh, allowed the whole artistic language to just fundamentally shift. The portrait stopped being just about the model.
It became, as the sources note, an auto-portrait.
It's a self-portrait.
Precisely. The focus moved entirely inward. It became about merging the image of the model with the artist's own inner world, their emotions, their personal style. The external model became a vehicle for the artist's internal exploration.
And the exhibition just brings this home with that powerful and frankly heartbreaking story about Van Gogh painting Madame Tribuc. He was in an asylum, but desperate to work. Tell us about that emotional transfer.
He managed to convince an orderly and his wife to sit for him. But when Van Gogh wrote about his model, Madame Tribuc, to his brother Theo, he used this shocking phrase. He called her merely a dusty blade of grass on the side of the road.
Wow, so the model's identity is almost secondary to the artist's own feeling of isolation.
That's the insight. It was Van Gogh's own suffering, his fear of becoming forgotten, of becoming that dusty blade of grass himself. That's what infused the portrait with such immense dramatic meaning. The artist's emotional struggle transforms this fleeting moment on a canvas into an eternal reflection of human suffering.
And that's the real revolutionary shift. The artist's personal truth becomes the main subject.
Yes, that's the moment.
That shift from external likeness to internal expression is a perfect bridge to the next section. The curatorial genius of this exhibition. It doesn't just go chronologically. It creates these unexpected cross-cultural dialogues.
Right, the organization is designed to make you think. By putting works from the West, the East, and Russia right next to each other, the curators force you to compare, to contrast what changed and what stayed constant in how we depict ourselves.
Which of those surprising pairings did you find the most revealing?
For me, the pairings that bridge media and time are particularly powerful. For example, you have Bill Viola's contemporary video art, his slow-motion piece on emotion, Sea of Silence, and it's positioned directly opposite a formal Dutch group portrait from centuries ago.
That's a wild juxtaposition.
It is. But it shows how a contemporary video artist is still grappling with the exact same structural problems. How do you capture a group's emotional and social dynamics that the Dutch masters were working on?
And it also links ancient techniques to modern subjects, which shows this incredible historical continuity.
Yes, think about the St. Petersburg artist Engelsky. He carves silhouettes of modern classics like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. But he uses an axe on wood, the traditional material of icon painting, and this is displayed near ancient Fayum portraits.
And for anyone who might not be familiar, Fayum portraits are those incredibly lifelike mummy portraits painted on wooden boards from Roman Egypt, right?
Exactly. Some of the most emotionally resonant portraits from antiquity, so placing them next to modern Russian carvings on wood links Egyptian antiquity to modern St. Petersburg art, all through the persistent power of the material and the individual face. It's a fascinating look at the persistence of form.
Speaking of persistence of form, the exhibition also traces artistic influence back to its source.
It does. Picasso's work, which famously drew inspiration from African art, is put right next to a vitrine with actual African masks. It lets you see the roots of modernism in real time.
And then there's that really poignant pairing.
The portrait of the executed Hungarian revolutionary Imre Szalai, facing Steve McCurry's famous photo portrait of the Afghan girl, a symbol of the tragedy of the Afghan war.
Two figures, decades apart, both symbols of global conflict and the human cost of revolution.
Yes.
So if we connect this back to our deep dive, The exhibition isn't just about famous historical sweeps, it's also about rediscovery. There are beloved masterpieces right alongside works that were hidden away or newly transformed.
That sense of discovery is absolutely intentional. The exhibit is almost a kind of public inventory, showing off works that were newly acquired or dramatically changed by restoration. For instance, the Hermitage recently got a portrait by the German artist Lenbach of the publisher Schmidt just before the opening.
And we often forget the incredible work that goes into just revealing the art of the past. Those four female profile portraits from the Lombard school we mentioned, they were meant for Renaissance cabinets, but the wooden supports were so damaged they needed this huge restoration.
And the story of the portrait of the youth Perugino is just wonderful. The restoration teams worked such magic on the piece that his cheeks now have what the restorers affectionately called a tender blush.
It's a reminder that these historical figures are constantly being, in a way, physically revived for us.
Absolutely.
So, after this incredible journey, from Siberian burial masks through the anxious realism of Philip the Arab to the emotional breakdown of the 19th century,
Oh.
what does the modern portrait tell us? We started with that struggle between the mask and the interface. How is that conflict resolved or maybe just further complicated today?
The conclusion really brings us full circle to a paradox. Many modern master portraitists actually return to a faceless technique. The mask is back, but in an abstract portraiture, concealing the person, much like those ancient rituals we started with.
The social mask returns, but in an artistic sense. But does concealing the physical face make the modern portrait less personal?
See, that's the ultimate question. Because despite the lack of an exposed face, these works are, paradoxically, often more open than what came before. They transmit incredibly powerful, raw emotions. Loneliness, despair, aggression.
Where do those emotions come from?
They're driven not by cynicism, but by the artist's profound sympathy and connection to the model. The mask of abstraction actually allows for the rawest internal emotion to be transmitted without the distraction of physical features.
That's a fascinating synthesis. The history of portraiture shows us that the battle between the social face and the true inner personality, it never ends. But the techniques used to capture it, from the crude cuts on Philip the Arab's bust to the psychological agony in Van Gogh, are all just these relentless attempts to make a person visible across time.
And the exhibition doesn't just show you this history, it makes you a part of it. At the very end, after you've seen the faces of Pharaoh Amenemhat, Napoleon, Peter I, you're invited to look into a large mirror.
You become the final portrait.
You become the final, most contemporary portrait in this 4,000-year-long narrative.
A perfect place to end this deep dive. If a portrait becomes truly great when a fleeting moment is captured as an eternity. Let's leave you with this thought to consider. In the constant struggle between our social mask and our inner face, what specific fleeting moment, what emotion or critical connection do you believe is the most crucial, the most enduring to capture for our current era?
Something to think about as you step away from that mirror. What would your portrait look like today?
We hope you enjoyed this journey through 4,000 years of personality and era. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.